There are moments in a judge's career when you realize you're not just ruling on a case. You're defending the entire judicial system from corruption. That moment came for me on a Thursday afternoon in September when Police Chief Raymond Garrett walked into my courtroom, looked me in the eye, and said, "Judge, you need to understand something. I run this city. You work for me. In this case, it's going to disappear, or you're going to disappear." In 38 years on this bench, I faced angry defendants, desperate attorneys, and powerful people trying to use influence to avoid accountability. But I'd never had someone directly threaten me in open court. But let me take you back, before that moment, to where this really started. It didn't start with a bang. It started with a piece of paper fluttering onto the windshield of a late model sedan parked in a 2-hour zone downtown. A parking ticket. The most ordinary thing in the world. The car belonged to Linda Garrett, and when she brought that little slip of pink paper home to her husband, Chief Raymond Garrett, something in him just snapped. See, Garrett wasn't used to his world intersecting with the world of petty fines and municipal bureaucracy. Not on the receiving end. He was the man who made the rules, or at least enforced them. His signature was on memos that shaped policy. His voice on the radio commanded units across the city. A parking ticket to him wasn't a violation. It was an insult. A greasy smudge on the gleaming badge of his authority. So he picked up the phone. He called the clerk's office, demanding the ticket be voided. He was told, politely but firmly, that there was a process. He could contest it in court like anyone else. That was the first spark, like anyone else. Those were the words that really got under his skin. He wasn't anyone else. He was the chief. The sense of entitlement, that invisible shield he'd carried for years, had just been tapped, and it rang hollow. That's when he decided to go over everyone's head. He sat down at his official department stationery and wrote a letter. It wasn't a request, it was a missile. He addressed it to me, Judge Caprio. He didn't argue about meter times or signage. He wrote about respect. He wrote about the essential cooperation between the police department and the courts. He wrote, and I'll never forget the phrasing, that it would be unfortunate if this minor matter were to create any unnecessary friction between our offices. The threat was velvet-gloved, but you could feel the iron fist inside. It was all implication, all leverage. Make this go away, or there will be consequences. He signed it with his full title, every word heavy, with intended intimidation. Chief of Police, Raymond T. Garrett. He dropped it in the mail, and I imagine he sat back in his leather chair, satisfied. He'd fired a warning shot across the bow. That would be the end of it. A few days later, my clerk, Maria, a woman who has seen everything in 30 years, brought me the mail. She had a particular way of placing something on my desk, a certain careful silence that told me when an item was trouble. She put the letter down, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You'll want to see this one, Judge," was all she said. I opened it. I read it once, then again, more slowly. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't anger at first. It was a deep, weary disappointment. Then the anger came, clean and sharp. This wasn't just about a parking ticket anymore. This was a direct attempt to subvert the law. He wasn't asking for justice. He was demanding special treatment and threatening retribution if he didn't get it. He was using the weight of his office to try and bend my courtroom. And in doing so, he was spitting on the very principle that keeps this whole fragile system from collapsing, that no one is above the law. Not a homeless man, not a millionaire, and certainly not a police chief. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't ignore it. To ignore it would be to become complicit. It would mean his theory of power was correct. But confronting it, that was a minefield. He was a powerful man with friends everywhere. I called Maria back in. "Schedule a hearing," I told her. "For the Garrett ticket?" she asked. "No," I said, tapping the letter on my desk. "For this, we're going to have a hearing on attempted intimidation of the court. Summon Chief Garrett to appear." The look on her face was a mix of shock and grim approval. She didn't say a word, just nodded and went to do it. The machinery of the court was set in motion, but this time it was turning against one of its own supposed pillars. The summons would have landed on his desk, just like his letter landed on mine. I've often wondered what he felt in that moment. Was it outrage? Did he laugh at the audacity? Or was there, deep down, a little whisper of doubt? A bare flicker of understanding that he'd crossed a line he couldn't just badge his way back over. The day of the hearing arrived. It was a Thursday. The docket was light, but the air in the courtroom was anything but. The usual low hum of anxiety was gone, replaced by a thick, tense silence. Word gets around in a courthouse. The clerks were quiet. The officers stood a little straighter. The few members of the public in the gallery seemed to sense they were about to see something out of the ordinary. I took the bench. The routine cases were handled, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the law. Not the statutes, but the spirit of the thing. The idea that this room, this bench, is the one place where power is supposed to be checked, where the little guy and the big guy stand on equal footing. And then the door at the back of the courtroom opened. Chief Raymond Garrett didn't slink in. He entered. He was in full uniform, every button polished, every ribbon perfect. He walked with the deliberate, confident stride of a man who owns every space he enters. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at the clerks. His eyes were fixed on me from the moment he cleared the doorway. There was no deference in his gaze, no recognition of the court's authority. It was a flat, challenging stare. He walked right up to the front, not to the defendant's table, but to a spot directly before the bench, as if he were about to give a press conference. The bailiff announced the case. In the matter of potential contempt and intimidation, regarding citation number G44721. I looked down at him. "Chief Garrett," I began, keeping my voice level. "You're here today regarding a letter you sent to this court concerning a parking citation issued to your wife. The court has concerns that the language of this letter constitutes an attempt to intimidate the judiciary and influence a judicial proceeding. How do you plead to this charge?" He didn't wait. He didn't consult an attorney. He just looked right back at me, and in a voice that was too loud, too sure for the quiet room, he said those words that changed everything. "Judge, you need to understand something. I run this city. You work for me." A stunned gasp rippled through the gallery. One of my clerks dropped a pen. The court reporter's fingers froze for a split second. Garrett kept going, leaning forward slightly, driving the point home. "In this case, it's going to disappear, or you're going to disappear." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. All the implied threats in the letter were now naked, spoken aloud in this temple of law. He had just, in front of witnesses, in front of the record, committed the brazen act he'd only hinted at on paper. He had looked the law in the face and told it to stand down. And in that silence, as I looked at this man who believed his power was absolute, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The uncertainty was gone. The minefield was now a simple path. He had handed me, with his own words, the clearest case of contempt I'd ever seen. The question was no longer if I would act, but how. The defense of the judicial system was no longer an abstract idea. It was my next sentence. This was the point of no return, for him and for me. That silence after his threat seemed to stretch, to become a physical thing in the room. You could see the confidence on Chief Garrett's face start to harden into something else as the echo of his own words hung in the air. He'd expected me to flinch, to back down, to get nervous. He was used to people folding when he played his ultimate card. But a judge's bench isn't a poker table. The law isn't a bluff. I let that silence do its work. I needed a moment, not for myself, but for everyone in that room. For the law students in the back, for the young public defender, for the single mother waiting for her own hearing, to feel the profound wrongness of what had just happened, to understand that this wasn't a disagreement. This was an attack. I adjusted my glasses and looked down at the letter, then back at him. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet, deceptively quiet. It wasn't the boom of a gavel, but the steady tone of a man reading a verdict. "Chief Garrett," I said, "let me make sure I understand you correctly. You have stated for the record in open court that I, a sitting judge, work for you. And you have further stated that a case before this court must disappear, or I, the judge, will disappear. Is that an accurate summation of your statements?" He shifted his weight. The uniform that usually radiated authority now seemed like a costume that was suddenly too tight. He hadn't planned for this. He'd planned for capitulation, not for clarification. "I'm stating how things work," he said. But the bravado was cracking at the edges. It was less, "I run this city," and more of a grumble. "How things work," I repeated slowly. "I see." I leaned forward, my elbows on the bench. "Let me tell you how things work in this room, Chief. In this room, the Constitution works. The rule of law works. In this room, a parking ticket and a murder trial are afforded the same fundamental respect for process. In this room, no one, not a homeless man, not a millionaire, and certainly not a police chief, gets to threaten the bench to get their way." I picked up his letter. "You sent this. You implied consequences if I didn't violate my oath. Today, you said it out loud. You have, in my nearly 4 decades of service, committed the most flagrant, direct act of contempt I have ever witnessed. You haven't just disrespected me. You've disrespected every officer who follows the rules, every citizen who believes in justice, and you have contempt for the law itself." His face was flushing a deep red. "Judge, you're taking this out of context. You were just threatening me," I cut him off, my voice gaining a little steel. "There is no context where that is acceptable. You are the chief of police. Your job is to uphold the law, not to stand above it and wield it like a club against anyone who inconveniences your family." I could see it then, the instant regret. It wasn't a moral awakening. It was the cold splash of reality. He was no longer in his domain, giving orders. He was in mine, and the rules here were different. The power he'd leaned on so heavily was now the very thing that was sealing his fate. His badge wasn't a shield here. It was an amplifier, making his offense 10 times worse. "Your Honor," he started again, and the shift in title was not lost on anyone. The judge of before was now a pleaded "Your Honor." I may have spoken hastily. "Hastily," I said. "Chief Garrett, this wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was the culmination of an attitude. You wrote it. You said it. You believed it." I took a deep breath. The calm I felt was giving way to a profound sadness. The most dangerous corruption isn't always bags of money. It's the quiet belief that the rules don't apply to you. It's the expectation of special treatment. That's what you brought into my court today. I looked over at the court reporter. "Please read back Chief Garrett's exact statements to the court." Her voice, professional and clear, cut through the tense air. "Judge, you need to understand something. I run this city. You work for me. In this case, it's going to disappear. Or you're going to disappear." Hearing his own words played back in that sterile official tone was the final blow. The last of the defiance drained from his posture. He looked, for the first time, like a man facing consequences. "So," I said, settling back, We have a clear statement of intent to intimidate the court. We have a written prior attempt, and we have the respondent's position as the highest law enforcement officer in the city, which makes this not a petty dispute, but a fundamental assault on the separation of powers. I paused, letting the gravity settle. I find you, Chief Raymond Garrett, in direct criminal contempt of this court. A final, soft, collective breath came from the gallery. The typical remedies for contempt are fine or imprisonment, I continued. But this is not a typical case. A fine would be a slap on the wrist. Imprisonment, while perhaps warranted, would serve no one at this moment. He was watching me now, utterly still, his fate hanging on the next words out of my mouth. This court's primary concern is not punishment, but preservation. Preservation of the integrity of the judiciary. Therefore, I am ordering the following. I began to list them, each point a deliberate, measured response to his abuse of power. 1. A formal public apology, in writing, to be filed with this court and disseminated to all city departments, in which you explicitly acknowledge that your statements and letter were wrongful attempts to influence judicial proceedings and undermine the rule of law. 2. You will personally, and on your own time, complete 20 hours of ethics training with the State Judicial Ethics Commission, and you will provide this court with a certificate of completion. 3. The original parking citation issued to your wife will be adjudicated on its merits by a different judge in a different municipality to avoid any appearance of bias. You will not contact that court. You will not interfere. And 4, I said, and this was the one that hit him hardest. For a period of 90 days, you are barred from entering this courthouse for any non-official police business. You will not come here to socialize, to lobby, or to remind people who runs this city. You will come only when your official duties as chief require it, and you will check in with the bailiff. This courthouse must be a place where every citizen feels the law is fair, and your presence, for now, undermines that feeling. He looked stricken. The public humiliation was one thing, the ethics training was another. But the ban from the courthouse, for a man whose identity was woven into the justice system, it was a form of exile. It was a visible, tangible symbol that he had broken the covenant of his office. Do you understand the orders of this court, Chief Garrett? I asked. He nodded, barely a movement. Yes, Your Honor. There will be no further warnings, I said, my tone final. Any deviation from these orders, any further attempt to contact this court improperly, will result in an immediate contempt hearing where incarceration will be the primary consideration. This matter is adjourned. I brought the gavel down. The sound was clean, sharp, and definitive. He didn't move for a long moment. Then, without looking at anyone, he turned and walked back up the aisle. The confident stride was gone. His shoulders were set, but they were the shoulders of a man carrying a new, heavy weight. The uniform was the same, but the man inside it had been profoundly altered. He had learned, in the hardest way possible, that there is always a higher authority, that the law is a wall that does not bend for anyone. The courtroom slowly exhaled. The hearing was over, but the lesson lingered in the air like smoke. It was a lesson about the fragility of justice and the constant need for people to stand guard over it. It was about the fact that the system only works when those inside it have the courage to say no to power, even, especially, when that power wears a familiar face and a polished badge. That Thursday in September wasn't about a parking ticket. It was about a line in the sand. And for one police chief, the regret for crossing it was instant, profound, and permanent. If you believe in holding power accountable, in stories where the little guy, or in this case, the principled judge, stands firm, then this is the channel for you. There are more stories like this, more moments where justice is defended in quiet courtrooms. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single one. Because the rule of law doesn't defend itself. It needs witnesses.
We continue to remember America's nicest judge, Frank Caprio.
Frank Caprio.
Frank Caprio.
Frank Caprio, known to a lot of folks as the nicest judge in the world.